The fluorescent lights above buzz faintly, casting a cold glow over the hospital room. She lies motionless in the bed, skin pale, lips tinged blue. Her chest rises and falls in slow, shallow breaths. Machines beep in a steady rhythm, the only proof she's still tethered to life. Tubes run from her arms. An oxygen mask fogs with each exhale. Her fingers tremble as she reaches for the phone beside her. With effort, she dials. "Mom?" Her voice is barely a whisper. I need help. Please. Can you come? I think I'm..." She swallows hard, pain etched across her face. "I'm scared." There's a pause on the other end. Then her mother's voice, clipped and cool. "We have dinner reservations. You should have called earlier." She blinks. "Dad?" He sighs. "You're too much lately. Honestly, you made your choices. Those kids aren't our responsibility." Click. The line goes dead. Silence presses in. Her eyes drift to the ceiling as a tear slips down her cheek. Then another. She doesn't cry out, doesn't scream. The pain in her chest isn't just physical. It's the final confirmation of something she's always tried to ignore. This isn't just a hard night. This is the truth. They were never coming. The bright lights of the hospital room are a stark contrast to the darkness in her mind. She drifts in and out of consciousness, but the memories from the past few months feel as sharp and heavy as if they happened just moments ago. How did she get here? It wasn't supposed to end this way, alone, fighting for air, fighting for her life. The weight of it all presses down on her chest, squeezing her lungs. She never expected motherhood to be easy, but she also never imagined it would be this suffocating. When her husband, Greg, died unexpectedly, it was as if the world had cracked open beneath her feet, and she was left clinging to the edges, trying not to fall into the abyss. Single motherhood hit harder than she could have prepared for. The constant hustle to balance work, raising 2 young children, and managing the house, it felt endless. She no longer had a moment to breathe, let alone grieve. Mornings were a blur, waking up at 5 a.m. to scramble breakfast before heading to work, then picking up the kids from daycare, making dinner, and trying to keep the house from falling into chaos. Bills piled up, unopened, and each late notice seemed to sting a little harder. Sometimes she'd catch herself staring blankly at the kitchen table, wondering if it would ever stop feeling like she was drowning. The exhaustion felt like a second skin, one she couldn't shed, no matter how hard she tried. But she had to keep going. There was no one else. Her children depended on her. They didn't ask for any of this. She didn't even know when her body finally gave out. One minute, she was spoon-feeding little Olivia her mashed potatoes, and the next, the world spun out of control. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and she collapsed, barely able to catch her breath. The kids screamed for her, and she could barely respond before everything went black. It was the neighbor, Mrs. Hernandez, who called 911, not wanting to believe what she was seeing, but knowing something was terribly wrong. Now, lying here in this sterile hospital room, the coldness of the reality she had been avoiding starts to settle in. The doctor had been kind, but blunt. "You need help," he said. "You can't do this alone. You need someone for your children. Have you contacted family?" His words echoed in her mind as she stared out the window at the bright, empty sky. She knew what the answer would be, and the idea of facing it again made her stomach churn. But there was no choice. She pulled out her phone and dialed, the weight of her decision hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Her parents had never been supportive of her choices, especially her decision to have children so young. Their love had always come with strings attached, a set of expectations she could never fully meet. She had never asked for much, But today, she had no other option. The phone rang, and when her mother picked up, her voice was as cold as it had always been. "What is it now?" she snapped. "We're busy, you know." "I'm in the hospital," she whispered, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I can't care for the kids right now. I need your help, please." There was a pause. Then her mother's voice, distant and uninterested. "We have dinner plans tonight. You should have called earlier, dear. I don't know what you want us to do." Her heart sank, but she couldn't stop herself. "Dad?" Her father's voice came through the line, heavy with annoyance. "You've been too much for us lately. You should have thought about your situation before. Those kids aren't our responsibility." And with that, the line went dead. Her breath caught in her throat. The tears came then, hot and silent. It wasn't just the exhaustion or the fear of what might happen to her, or even the ache in her chest from being so utterly alone. It was the brutal truth. Her parents had always been distant, but hearing those words, hearing how easily they turned their backs, it shattered something inside of her. They weren't coming. No one was coming. Her shoulders shook as the sobs racked her body, soft and broken, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself feel it all, the weight of the years, the betrayal, the fear, and the realization that she couldn't do it alone any longer. Her childhood home was filled with silence. Her parents, both busy with their own lives, were often physically present but emotionally absent. There was no warmth in their voices when they spoke to her, no encouragement when she struggled, no celebration when she succeeded. Birthdays and holidays passed by like any other day, with her mother often too busy to bake a cake and her father too tired to attend her school plays. It wasn't cruelty. It was neglect, subtle but ever-present, the kind that eroded a child's self-worth over time. She learned early on that her accomplishments, no matter how big or small, wouldn't bring the praise she craved. Her younger sister, Lily, was always the star of the show. Lily, with her natural charm, her effortless beauty, and her way of drawing people in. She was the one who received the compliments, the awards, the attention. Their parents adored her, and in their eyes Lily could do no wrong. Meanwhile, she was left to fade into the background, always in the shadow, always overlooked. She tried harder, harder than Lily, harder than anyone else. She poured herself into her studies, made sure the house was always tidy, and kept a smile on her face even when it hurt. She never complained, never asked for anything, not even the things other children seemed to get without effort. She didn't want to burden her parents with her needs, she just wanted to be seen. So, she worked. She excelled. And she was still ignored. It wasn't until she met Jake that she truly felt seen. He was different, attentive, kind, patient. He didn't just hear her, he listened. With him, she didn't have to work for affection. It was freely given, without conditions or expectations. He loved her flaws, her quiet moments, her humor, and her ambition. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to prove her worth. She could just be, and that was enough. She thought that love would be the anchor she had been searching for all her life. And then, just like that, it was gone. Jake's death was sudden. A car accident on a rainy night that left him gone in the blink of an eye. The world she had built around herself and Jake collapsed instantly, leaving nothing but rubble. The grief overwhelmed her. She didn't know how to be a mother without him, how to manage the bills without him, how to find a way forward when she couldn't breathe without him, beside her. But even in the midst of her own emotional and financial collapse, she couldn't escape the pull of her parents. They hadn't been there when Jake died. They hadn't shown up at the funeral or offered comfort. But they still needed her. And she, desperate for the love she'd always craved, didn't know how to say no. They needed money, her money, and she gave it, because that was what she had been conditioned to do her whole life. Give, even when it meant sacrificing herself. She hoped, maybe foolishly, that this time would be different. Maybe if she helped them, they would finally see her, really see her, and appreciate her the way she had always wanted. Maybe they would acknowledge the years she had spent supporting them, hoping for a love that felt real. But each time she gave, each time she sent another check to cover their bills or took on another responsibility to make up for their mistakes, she only found herself sinking deeper into the same cycle of rejection. The guilt was suffocating, the obligation crushing, but she kept doing it. Because if she didn't, if she stopped, then there was no hope, no chance of them ever loving her the way she had always wanted. She needed them to love her. She needed to believe that, even now, after everything, there was still a way to make them proud, but every effort only made the distance between them feel wider, like a chasm that could never be crossed. The sterile hospital room was filled with quiet hums and distant voices. The days seemed to blur together, the steady beep of the machines her only company. The reality of her isolation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She was alone, not just in this room, but in her life. No family, no support. No one had come. That was when Nurse Hannah entered. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with kind eyes that softened when they landed on the narrator. She had been coming in and out of the room for the last few hours, checking on her vitals, offering small reassurances, but now she lingered. She sat beside the bed, a hand gently resting on the narrator's arm. "You're not alone," Hannah said, her voice low but steady. "I'm here for you." It was a small thing, a moment of kindness, but it felt monumental. For the first time in days, the narrator didn't feel like she was drowning. She could breathe a little easier, knowing someone was there, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. "Thank you," the narrator whispered, surprised at how emotional the simple words made her. I don't know what to do anymore." "You're going through a lot right now," Hannah said, her voice filled with empathy. "But you don't have to do this alone. You've got me, and if you need help with your kids when you get out of here, we can arrange something." That simple offer, an actual solution, felt like a lifeline, but also a reminder of just how deep her isolation ran. She had been surviving for so long, but she had never truly lived. Not without help, not without support, and now she had no one left to lean on but strangers. A few hours later, another nurse entered the room. This one, older and with a quiet confidence, introduced herself as Claire. "There's someone I know who might be able to help you," Claire said. "A licensed caregiver. Her name's Vanessa. She's wonderful with kids, and she can help while you're recovering. I'll give her a call if you'd like." The offer hung in the air for a moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the narrator felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe there was a chance to rebuild, to stop feeling like she was barely holding it all together. She nodded slowly, grateful but hesitant. She didn't want to trust someone else again, didn't want to open herself up to another disappointment. But what other choice did she have? Within an hour, Vanessa arrived. She was calm and confident, her presence almost instantly putting the children at ease. Olivia, who had been clinging to her mother's side for the past few days, immediately accepted Vanessa's gentle touch, offering her a quiet smile. Noah, who hadn't spoken a word since the hospital visit, finally let out a soft giggle as Vanessa knelt to tie his shoes. It was like the room had suddenly filled with light. The tension that had been so thick in the air for days, weeks even, started to dissipate. The kids relaxed, their shoulders dropping from the weight of anxiety they had carried. The narrator watched, her heart aching with a strange combination of relief and guilt. She had been so focused on surviving, on holding everything together by sheer force of will, that she had never truly considered what her children needed, not just in terms of food, clothes, and shelter, but in terms of care, love, security, stability. She felt the guilt settle in, a tight knot in her chest. She had always tried to give them everything, but at what cost? And why had she kept pushing herself, striving so hard for her parents' approval when they had never chosen her, never once shown the same care or love she gave so freely to her children? Was it for them or for herself, her hope that one day they would see her, love her, the way she had always wanted? The thought lingered, gnawing at her. She hadn't just been trying to keep her children afloat, she had been trying to prove something to a family who didn't care. Sitting there in the hospital bed, watching Vanessa connect with her children, something shifted in her. It wasn't just the exhaustion that had driven her to the edge. It was the realization that her worth had never depended on her parents' love or approval. She had been worthy all along. Her hand moved instinctively to her phone, and without thinking, she opened her banking app. The scheduled $2,000 transfer to her parents' account was staring back at her, a reminder of everything she had sacrificed for their approval. The money had been sent every month for years now, an automatic payment she never questioned. But today, in this moment of clarity, she saw it for what it was, a never-ending cycle of giving, hoping, and getting nothing in return. Her finger hovered over the screen. She thought about the guilt that had always followed her decisions, the way she had given so much of herself for so long. And then, with a deep breath, she pressed the cancel button. No explanation, no justification, just an ending. It was done. She was done. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like freedom. She sat in the hospital bed, her fingers hovering over the phone. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, but this time it was different. She wasn't hesitant. She wasn't second-guessing herself. The words came easily, like they had been waiting to escape for years. With a steady hand, she typed the message. "I will no longer be providing financial support. Do not contact me. My children and I deserve better." The finality of the words echoed in her mind. It was simple, firm. There was no room for debate, no more justifications or excuses. She hit send before she could change her mind. It was done. A strange, surreal calm washed over her. At first, it felt like a heavy silence in the air, the kind that fills a room after a loud, prolonged argument. But then it shifted, turning into something else, something lighter. It was terrifying and freeing all at once. Grief tangled with relief, and for a moment, she didn't know which emotion was stronger. The nurse came in to check on her. Hannah, the kind nurse who had been her quiet anchor over the past few days, noticed the tears welling up in her eyes. She hesitated before sitting down beside her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but her voice cracked. I think I've just finally let go." Hannah didn't say anything. She just sat there, her hand on the narrator's, and let the silence speak for itself. And then the tears came. They didn't come from a place of sadness, but from something deeper, something that had been building for years, buried beneath layers of forced strength and resilience. It was the release of a lifetime of unmet expectations, of years of trying and failing to earn the love that had always felt out of reach. She cried not for what she had lost, but for what she had never had, for the little girl inside her who had never felt truly seen. As she wept, memories flooded back. She remembered the piano recitals where she played her heart out, waiting for applause that never came, only to see Lily take the spotlight moments later, receiving flowers and praise. She remembered the birthday parties, the ones where she made all the arrangements and spent hours decorating, but where her parents barely showed up, more interested in their own lives than the one they had created for her. There were the graduations, too, her moment of triumphs marred by her parents' indifference, their absence lingering like a shadow. She had always hoped that one day they would see her. One day they would realize the quiet sacrifices she made for them, the love she poured into the family, and finally choose her. But that day never came. And now she had to let go of that dream. The dream that one day they would be different, that they would change. She let herself feel that loss fully, for the first time. The loss of a love she had longed for her entire life, the loss of the parents she had never truly had. And in the midst of that grief, there was something else, a quiet acknowledgement of her own strength. She had survived without their love. She had given all of herself for them, and now she was reclaiming it. This was the beginning of something new, even if it hurt. Recovery was slow and painful. Every movement seemed to remind her of her body's fragility. Each ache, each twinge, a reminder that she had been living on the edge for too long. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't doing it alone. Vanessa stayed with them for several days, easing the burden off her shoulders. She was there when the kids woke up, when they needed help with their homework, and when it was time to get them to bed. Her calm presence filled the gaps that had been empty for so long. As the days passed, the children began to bond with Vanessa in a way she hadn't expected. Olivia, who had been so clingy just days before, began to smile again, genuine, unforced smiles. Noah, who had barely spoken in days, was telling Vanessa jokes, making her laugh. They were starting to feel safe again, and that safety extended to her as well. She had been so used to being the only one holding everything together, but now she was able to take a breath and see that help was not a sign of weakness, but a lifeline. She began therapy soon after, reluctantly at first. Talking to a stranger about her life felt like opening a wound that had never fully healed, but it quickly became clear that it was the only way forward. Each session peeled back another layer of pain, but it also allowed her to finally start understanding her own worth without the weight of her parents' rejection, without the burden of trying to earn love that had never been hers to begin with. She started journaling, filling pages with her thoughts, fears, and moments of clarity. Writing became a way for her to connect the dots in her life, to process what had happened, and to move forward. She also reached out to other single mothers online, connecting with women who understood her struggles in ways no one else could. Their stories mirrored her own. Their shared advice and encouragement gave her the strength to keep going, to keep fighting for herself and her children. The support she had longed for her entire life started to materialize in unexpected ways. Neighbors who had noticed her struggle offered help, sometimes with the kids, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just a kind word. Strangers at the park gave her a reassuring smile when she felt overwhelmed, while old friends who had drifted away in the chaos of her life reached out, offering their support without question. Slowly, She began to rebuild a community around her, one made up of people who actually saw her, who cared for her not because of obligation, but because they wanted to. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to be helped, without shame. She stopped apologizing for needing others, stopped feeling like a burden when she asked for support. It was a humbling experience, but also an empowering one. She had spent so long trying to do it all on her own, but now she knew. Real strength wasn't in doing everything herself. Real strength was in allowing herself to be vulnerable, to trust, to accept the kindness of others without the fear of disappointment. It wasn't easy, but she was changing. Little by little, day by day, she was learning to lean into the love and support she had once believed was out of reach. And for the first time, she was able to see that maybe, just maybe, she deserved it. Months passed, and with each day, she grew stronger. The recovery was still ongoing, but it wasn't as painful as before. She was home now, in the small but cozy house she had created for her family. The walls no longer felt suffocating. They felt like a safe place, filled with the laughter of her children and the warmth of a life being rebuilt from the ground up. She had learned how to take care of herself, really take care of herself. Her health had improved, her spirit was lighter, and she was no longer consumed by the overwhelming weight of expectations. She had found a rhythm in her new life, one that didn't rely on the approval of others. She knew who she was now, strong, capable, and deserving of love. Her parents had tried to reach out once, a brief message left in her inbox, as cold and distant as ever. "We're sorry we haven't been there for you. Can we talk?" She read the message, but she didn't reply. It wasn't anger that held her back, nor bitterness. It was simply the fact that she didn't need them anymore. She had spent so many years chasing after their approval, waiting for them to see her, to love her. But now she realized that their love could never fill the space inside her that only she could fill. She no longer needed their validation. She had learned, finally, how to choose herself. Her children were thriving, and that was all that mattered. Her son, Noah, who had once been so withdrawn, had blossomed into a confident, joyful boy. One evening, he presented her with a picture he had drawn, a simple scene of Mom, Vanessa, and me, his small crayon figures smiling together in a circle. She smiled as she looked at the drawing, her heart swelling with pride. They were happy. They were safe. And she, for the first time in years, felt that way too. As she watched her children play, she thought back to the night in the hospital, the moment when everything had shifted, when she had stopped begging for love, stopped fighting for approval that would never come, and instead started to love herself. It had been the hardest thing she had ever done, and also the most freeing. She no longer lived in the shadow of her parents' rejection. She no longer defined herself by their absence. She didn't regret the silence that followed. That silence had been the space where she finally found herself. What she regretted was not doing it sooner, waiting so long to stop begging and start choosing herself. But now, as she looked at her children, as she felt the warmth of a new beginning, she knew that the past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, she was going to choose her own ending.